relevance. Which brings me to the second biggest change. The consumer has become more elusive, and we haven't been smart about finding her or quick enough to change. This chart shows how the consumer is expected to spend his or her time in media in 2005 versus the client spending. From these data, you'd have to take a long, hard look at the spend on newspapers and online. It's obvious that papers are overspent. Online is underspent because of the size of its growth. Small wonder marketers are uncertain, and here is how we see that changing. We are rebalancing the way we use and buy media. We're looking for bigger internet ideas and bolder negotiations with newspapers, and we're working to uncover more and more powerful mobile opportunities, and we're revisiting our investment levels in developing markets as well. This chart shows a world map not based on land size, but as you know, population. And I don't need to tell you that the budgets in China and India don't reflect the current impact of that demographic power. But those brick markets will be the drivers for the future, and there will be bigger and bigger spends here. We've all created this landscape, this chaos, and most important, these opportunities for our companies and our brands. We created the global economy and global consolidation. We created the digital revolution. We created a never-ending number of choices for consumers. And you in this room have helped create the stability and vibrancy of the Indian market. But most importantly, we have enabled our consumers. We have given them the power. We gave them the upper hand that we used to have. And we handed the consumers the keys to our marketing kingdom, which they happily accepted. First, we created what we call the atomized individual. Let's listen to him. You know who they are, those atomized individuals. They're the people who not only say it has to be relevant to me, they mean it. And they have lots of weapons in their fight against irrelevance. They toss the mail. They sign up, at least in America, for do not call lists. They use PVRs, DVRs, or even remote controls to skip ads. If it's not relevant, if it's not relevantly served up, they turn off and tune out. And they're well-educated, high income, and are exactly the customers most marketers want. Second, we created the customer-managed market. Let's listen to her. In the customer-managed market, the atomized individual can and will choose how they engage with you, the marketer. They have technology at their disposal and are aggressively adopting it, and in doing so, the power is all theirs. These new technologies are empowering old tendencies. After all, people have always tried to avoid advertising and been cynical, and now we've given them the means to deal with their frustrations. Thirdly, we've created a consumer who is all about consideration, very savvy about how we market to him and her, and about how he chooses to buy. The atomized individual, empowered by customer-managed market, living in a consideration economy, fueled by demand information. And in that economy, the basic purchase process hasn't changed. Thousands of years ago, when the first farmers brought goods to market, the first buyers went through awareness as they browsed, consideration as they mulled what to buy, and trial as they picked and poked at that produce. And as they bartered and haggled to use it, they purchased. If the experience was good, they went back, and loyalty and evangelism might come along. It still happens today. But what's happened is a shift in time. The tools and the energy and consideration. Technology, the digitization we spoke of earlier, has enabled the latent need for information that underpins it. In a recent study, consumers were asked what most influenced a decision to purchase for cars, banking, travel, consumer packaged goods, and banking. The answer was overwhelmingly the internet. Consumers spend more time browsing and comparing and considering, and then in an instant, with one click enabled, they buy. So what about all this new reality? What are the things that we observe in our company with 4,500 clients operating in 100 countries? What do we see as the best practices? And I want to get to what we see as some prescriptives, but first let's talk about the role of the brand in this new chaos. Brands have been around since 1200 AD. When we talk about their history, because I believe showing up on time is 90% of being successful, and knowing the history is the other 10, so let's look back. The first use of a brand was just that, a mark of ownership on cattle. And later, trademarks were used to define individual products, and English law, passed in 1266, required bakers to put their mark on every loaf of bread sold. And what they said was, to the end that if any breads be faulty in weight, it may be then known in whom the fault is. We're getting close to a money-back guarantee in the 13th century. The red triangle of Bass, the oldest trademark still in use today, was registered in England in the 1600s. Its purpose was to help the illiterate drinker, with whom I'm intimately acquainted, distinguish William Bass's fine India Pale Ale that he considered from what he considered to be inferior products. In the 19th century, large migrations of people to cities meant that consumers could no longer know where the goods they purchased came from. Branding involved in a useful way of letting them know who the producers were. But then brands came to a more rarefied form. They became a set of promises. They became a trust mark that manufacturers made on behalf of those products. And historically, creating and strengthening brands was a rather direct process. A brand name, a promise of quality and consistency, and for that quality and consistency, consumers were willing to pay a premium, and pay they did. Marketers owned brands for a while, but now, as we saw earlier, consumers own them, and as A.G. Lafley, the CEO of Procter & Gamble, recently said, marketing today is a collaborative affair. Our consumers are just as involved in the process as we are. So what do you do with that in today's market? Brands are even more important in this time of chaos. They communicate quality, consistency, and trust. And because consumers use them to cope with the ever-increasing amount of chaos and choices, they need them more than ever. As creators and builders and nurturers of brands, we can tell stories and deliver the messages in ways that connect powerfully with consumers on an emotional level, even though they're in charge. We can transcend the power of search engines and deliver stories that engage on any medium, including digital, as long as we keep in mind the end goal to build trust and connect emotionally. And digital platforms have moved magically from what used to be annoying interruptions with banner ads to rich content brand experiences. Interpublic has hundreds of agencies. Our fastest growing is an interactive digital agency. That's all they do. They've been Interactive Agency of the Year 3 out of the last 4 years. And to take a look at why, let's look at some of a brief reel. It's not a television reel, this is a digital reel. Wasn't that long ago we used to show television reels, how the world has changed. Our job still is to tell emotional stories with power. That's how love brands are created, and love brands are those brands consumers can't do without, like iPod. And when I think of that kind of emotional connection and those kinds of stories that we tell in our craft, I show the following clip from the movie Love Actually, where actor Colin Firth plays an English writer so smitten with a Portuguese girl he meets when she keeps his house in France. He learns Portuguese a little, tracks her down in Portugal. This is love. That's what we do. We tell rich stories with emotion. I want to leave you with some prescriptives about what I see as to how to deal with all this chaos. What's important in this time of marketing? What's changed and how to leverage it? And I'm going to call them chaos busters because I believe that following them can help us bust this time of uncertainty. So let me go first to chaos buster number 1. I say kiss change on the lips. More importantly, create an organization in your company that kisses change on the lips. Get rid of what I call the past clingers and protect and nurture those change agents. I've watched change cultures do exciting things with this to keep themselves current. I've even seen some of our agencies appoint evangelists for each new kind of media form to learn everything and teach and make it a new part of the culture as a part of being change agents. One of our companies even has an individual evangelist, one for Google, one for Yahoo, one for MSM, as well as one for blogging and podcasts. Creating change is a winning formula. And I believe that an A culture with B players will beat a B culture with A players every day. Churchill and Darwin were both right about change. They just didn't know how incredibly poignant it would be at this time in marketing. Winston Churchill said, "To improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often." Now, Darwin is a personal favorite of mine. At another time, 10 or so years ago, I went on a private expedition to retrace the steps of Charles Darwin and his Beagle crew in Patagonia, and that's another story. It was extraordinary. But what's really important is what Darwin said about change and its relation to busting chaos. He said it's not the strongest species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one most responsive to change. And that's true for marketers. Change buster number 2, partner with the CFO. I've talked about love brands and making emotional connections, but honestly, accountability is the key to future success, and yet many marketers and their agencies seem to want to avoid it. We're in the creative business. Accountability is for someone else. At Interpublic, we've set up our own high-end consulting company just to deal with this issue of return on investment, and our clients are doing it themselves too. Ann McDonald, the Chief Marketing Officer at Citigroup, literally spent 2 years in lockstep with her CFO, jointly developing the matrix against which they would judge all their efforts. And she says, don't bother asking your agencies to do it because as marketers, we won't give them all the data that they need. If you don't have a chief accountability officer or head of measurement or even